Here we are, day 11 of 21 Days of Fear, where I am going live for 21 days, talking about all the ways that fear shows up in our lives that we might not recognize, are areas that we have not yet healed. And today we're going into some yummy stuff where we're talking about how to notice when there is unprocessed trauma and fear that is still holding us back. Because of the last 10 days and everything we talked about, hi everyone who's here with me now, you likely have come to see now that a lot of this is stuff that we don't notice happening, right? Or we have become so used to it, so conditioned in it, that we don't recognize it holding us back. So I want to talk about some of the ways that you can recognize if there is still deeper healing work to show up for. The first one is how you relate to your parents. If there are moments when you are still triggered by your parents or by your grandparents or by your brother and sister, how you relate to your family. If you're like, I get messages a lot where people are like, I was having this amazing day and then I got on the phone with my mother or my father and all of this rage came out, right? Because a lot of our core wounding got picked up and programmed in our developmental years, in our childhood. Our parents are going to be the people who trigger those core wounds to come to the surface so that we can see that there are areas internally that we are not whole and healed and free of our trauma, that these areas are still holding on to stories and beliefs and patterned ways of being that are self-sabotaging us and keeping us stuck in patterns that are not serving our highest and best. So if you find yourself being triggered by your family, then that is one way that you know that there are traumas and fears that are still holding you back in life. Now, if your parents are no longer alive, or maybe you are now the parent, for people who are parents, another way for this to show up is you're triggered by your children. Being triggered by our children is also revealing to us deeper things in our childhood existence that have not been healed. Now, why is it important to heal things from our childhood when we're, say 75 years old and we've lived our lives and we've done the things and, everything is okay? Yeah, sure, we get upset with people from time to time, or we are holding on to some anger or this or that. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. My life's almost over. Well, because these core traumas that are developmental from our childhood, they get passed forward. They continue with us through our lifetimes, passed into the ancestral bloodline, and they continue to come up until someone says, I am going to heal this. When it's dynamics with your children, this can be very challenging as a mother or father to feel so triggered by your child and to know that you're then in your response of your child wounding, coming up and maybe yelling at them, is then programming them in the same way that you were programmed to be afraid as a child. So you see how these things pass forward. So those are a couple of really great ways for you to recognize if there is still unprocessed trauma and fear that's holding you back. Now, say your parents aren't alive and you don't have children and you're wondering, okay, well, how will I know? other ways to, other things that happen in our lives, we'll say this better this way, to reveal to us that there is still things internally happening that have not been healed. One of them is through shoulder, back, and neck pain. Shoulder, back, and neck pain are all symptoms of unprocessed, unhealed pain and trauma, whether that trauma was extreme or very simple, very small in our context. When there's trauma that happens, the first things that change, our spine constricts, our shoulders tighten, and our neck and chin jut forward, which creates chronic pain in these parts of our body. No amount of massage, chiropractic adjustments, acupuncture, what are some of the other things that people do when there's chronic pain, pain meds? No amount of that on its own is going to heal that pain. Sure, it might create a temporary release of the severity of the pain. That being said, when it's chronic, it means it keeps coming back. So if it keeps coming back, it's because it is from these fundamental shifts that happen in our spine, shoulders, and neck when we have trauma that has not been healed. And I have seen amazing things happen where through trauma and fear healing, postural shifts immediately take place. It's like in that moment, once that trauma has been integrated and truly healed and the nervous system resets, if you're tuned into postural alignments, and this is something that I studied in depth in my previous life, in this life when I was going to school for criminal psychology, I was learning about all the things that happen in our body and how our body is communicating. Essentially, I was studying to learn how to interrogate criminals and things like that, and to be able to tell when their body was speaking something that they weren't telling, right? So through those through those trainings, I started to recognize all these different things in the body and how it communicates. And then as I shifted into my healing work and into, even my own journey, as certain layers of my trauma would start to heal, I would see very clear shifts in my posture, and certain pains that were chronic, that seemed like they'd been going on forever, decades, were just gone. It didn't matter if it was through the roping or through anything else. None of that would impact these until these deeper core traumas that are actually created, those shifts, those tensions. Remember, tension puts us in protection mode. When we're in protection mode, we're living in fight, flight, or freeze. We're living in sympathetic dominance, and we cannot heal from this space. We heal in rest, restore, relaxation mode. But when we've been so conditioned to stay in protection mode because of our life's experiences of trauma, we have to first get our brain to recognize it can let go of protection mode to make that shift into a space where we can actually start to heal. Then those tensions that have been there forever, as it seems, in your body, they're gone. Because your spine, your shoulders, and your neck return to rest and restore mode. And in that mode, there is no tension. So we talked about parents, if we're being triggered by our parents, children, if you're being triggered by your children. We've talked about chronic pain in the body. The last one that I'm going to speak to is digestive problems, issues with digestion. Issues with digestion show up in a whole host of ways. They show up in maybe feeling constipated, maybe not going to the bathroom after every meal, maybe having diarrhea, maybe having, stomach aches, stomach pains, having food sensitivities, things like that are all symptoms of a gut that is not functioning in its highest and best. And why is our gut a messenger to show us that there's still unprocessed trauma and fear holding us back? And if you watched, I can't remember what video it was in the series. That being said, I'll just briefly touch on it again. Our vagus nerve is what turns on our parasympathetic rest and restore mode in our body. And our vagus nerve also turns on our gut biome to do all of its amazing things with the neurotransmitters that allow our gut to be the healing factory of our body. So when our gut is unable to be the healing factory because it is in a state of imbalance, that shows up through food sensitivities and diarrhea, constipation, tummy aches, lack of energy, all the ways that shows up. When we're in constant fight or flight or freeze in that sympathetic mode, our vagus nerve isn't able to function and turn on the parasympathetic mode. So then it doesn't turn on the gut biome to do all of its magical things that the gut does in order to keep us healthy. And then we start to go down these paths of having these weird little ailments show up in our body because the healing factory is compromised. And our healing factory being compromised is a sure tell sign that our nervous system is not functioning properly, because if we cannot get our nervous system into parasympathetic mode, we cannot turn on our gut to do what it's designed to do effectively, which is to heal our whole body. Our gut is so important, right? So these are 4 things that you can make note of in your life if they're happening, to become aware if there is deeper inner healing work that, is to be done for you to step forward in your life from a space of your strength and your confidence and your power and your full potential, no longer hindered by your own self-sabotaging patterns because you're in trauma response, because you're in fight or flight all the time, because that stress is always there. So yeah, the last one I'll say, which I'll add in a 5th one here. Stress. Stress, just like it sounds, stress stresses our body out. And stress is another warning sign that our body is sending to us that says there are things internally that need to be addressed and healed so that we can unwind our nervous system. There is a system for how we go through these various systems of our body and their system structures, right? We have to go and unlock them step by step so that we can bring wholeness to us. If our neurology, if our brain is in protection mode, then our nervous system will stay in fight or flight mode. If our nervous system stays in fight or flight mode, then our vagus system will not trigger our gut to turn into healing mode. When our gut is not in healing mode, our body gets sick. We have less energy, less motivation, less connection to source. Our solar plexus, the soul, the sun, our center, governs our gut, right? So when we are unable to be in that solar energy, we have less energy and motivation and connection to source. Other things that happen is say our endocrine system starts to malfunction along this process because it's constantly being burnt out by our nervous system, impacting our HPA axis. When our HPA axis is being impacted because our nervous system is staying in fight or flight and our brain is in protection mode, which are both signaling to the HPA axis to keep cortisol pumping through our body, then we stay in this constant chronic space of stress. When that happens, the HPA axis directly impacts our endocrine system, and then we start to have our adrenals kick out, our thyroid kicks out, right? Pituitary kicks out. By kicks out, I mean they stop doing what they're supposed to be doing. Our thyroid is where our monad plugs into our body. Our thymus gland, which is also in the endocrine system, is where our soul plugs into our body. So when our endocrine system stops working properly, we lose connection to our spirit. We lose connection to our soul. We lose connection to our monad. We lose connection to source. And from that space of disconnect, we stay even more deeply in fight or flight, which just creates a tremendous amount of stress and pain and suffering that in order to restore that connection, we come into what's happening in our bodies. And how do we bring these systems back into balance and harmony so that these possibilities that we have available to us, connection to these, magical realms of our existence, the miracle that we are, happens through bringing our systems back into balance. So, just tuning into comment here. The microbiome is all messed up, absolutely. The gut has a connection to the mind, etc. Yeah, so when our gut stays in a space of disharmony, it becomes open to a whole host of pathogens and parasites and harmful bacteria and funguses and molds to proliferate throughout our entire gut biome. And then these creatures, we'll call them, take over the signals that get sent to our brain. And they take over our actual thinking process. And it's like when we're in this space of dysfunction, all of these parasitic beings, if they're able to come into us and live inside of our body, well, then they're definitely able to come into our energetic bodies as well, right? So it's just a domino effect, which is why we have to go back to the source and begin bringing our systems back into harmony and healing the trauma that has opened us up to be susceptible to a life of fear and suffering. And today's video is all about things that will help you to recognize, because we get into this delusion where everything just stays the same. So we normalize our pain, we normalize our suffering. And when we normalize it, we don't recognize that there's something that needs to change, something that needs our attention to heal. So the 5 things that I talked about today, if you're getting triggered by your family, by your parents, if you get triggered by your children, if you're experiencing stress, if your gut is having issues with your health, and if you're in chronic pain of your back, shoulders, or neck. These are all symptoms that there is deeper healing work to do. And once you are aware of that, you no longer can hide from yourself and you have a choice to make. You can either play into the victim role, or you can choose to rise to the occasion and to change your life for all of the generations that come after you, for all of humanity. So, thank you for joining me. I'm Ahaumna. This is day 11 of 21 days of fear. We have 10 more days to go. And if you are just tuning in today, you can go onto my IGTV page, or you can go onto my Facebook page in the videos tab and watch the first 10 days. They are also being posted onto my YouTube page, which is at Rainbow Jones. If you have any questions about Fearlessly Express, which is coming out, where we will be going in and putting balance back into our systems, restoring and shifting our reality so that we're no longer in these patterns of stress, fight, flight, freeze, to reclaim our power as conscious sentient beings who are healthy and free to live the lives that we came here to live, then please do check out my website. It's in the link in my bio on both Facebook and Instagram, and at all times feel free to send me a message if you want to have a dialogue about what we're going to be doing in Fearlessly Expressed. I hope that you are receiving value and insight and inspiration to your life through these 21 days. And yeah, I look forward to tuning in with you all tomorrow for day 12. And may the rest of your day or your evening or your morning, wherever you're at in the world, be filled with everything that you are ready for now. Much love to you all.